Folks, here are our notes for section 1.3. And so 1.3, we're all about subtraction now. And in math, honestly, there's really no such thing as subtraction. It's just kind of a shorthand way to write out problems without writing out what's really going on. And subtraction, its real definition is addition by the opposite. So what we do usually is if we're doing, say, 6 take away 4, instead of, we write that instead of writing what's really going on, which is 6 plus negative 4. Again, the parentheses are just there to separate the addition and the negative sign to make it look a little nicer. So subtraction means addition by the opposite. We write it like this usually so we don't have to write all that. So what I'm going to suggest you do is now when we're doing subtraction problems, especially with positive and negative numbers, is that you change them from this to that. So we change the subtraction sign to adding the opposite. So we're going to change subtraction to add the opposite, and I'll show you what that looks like here in a minute. Okay, so for example, let's say we want to do 5 minus 2. Okay, you all know that the answer to that is 3. And when you're doing your homework, you do not need to change something obvious like this around. But as it gets trickier, I think you'll need to. But let me just show you how it works. So 5 take away 2 is the same as 5 plus negative 2. And 5 plus negative 2, well, that again is 3. So what you're used to is really this, and it's just a kind of easier way to write it. So let's look at a few more here, and this is where I think changing it's going to be really helpful. So what if you have 9 take away negative 3? Well, that could be a little tricky, okay? Some of you can probably see the answer, but I'm going to change it to adding the opposite. So from now on, I'm going to take subtraction signs and I'm going to make them addition, and the number after it becomes its opposite. So 9 take away negative 3 is now 9 plus positive 3 because I'm adding the opposite. Well, what's 9 plus 3? Well, that's 12. And so without changing it, that could be a little tricky. What if we have something like negative 8 take away 14? Some way this is a little easier than the last one, but again, I'm going to change it to add the opposite. Okay, so now I have negative 8 plus negative 14. Well, two negative signs. So remember, when we have two signs that are same, we add them up and keep the sign. So negative 8 plus negative 14 is going to be negative 22. Okay, pardon my focusing there for a second. Okay, so let's look at a few more. What about negative 6 take away negative 2? Again, without changing it, that might be a little hard to figure out. So we add subtraction to addition, the number after it to its opposite. Notice the number in front we don't change. That stays by itself. So that stays the same. We change that and we change that. So this negative 6 minus negative 2 is now negative 6 plus positive 2. So when we add those together, we get negative 4. Okay, so a lot of your homework will be like this. Some of it will be where you have to add 3 numbers together. Something like this. Or I'm sorry, subtract and add with 3 numbers. So here, addition, we don't have to do anything to, but subtraction, anytime you see a subtraction sign, I make this add and the number after the sign to the opposite. The 16 there is going to stay the same. So now this might be a little easier to see. Negative 2 and negative 8, when we combine those, we get negative 10. That's these guys, plus 16. And so here we're adding two numbers where the signs are different. So remember, we subtract and your answer has the sign of the bigger number. So 16 take away 10 is 6. 16 is positive, so our answer is positive. So again, I'm just going left to right. I'm changing the subtraction signs to adding the opposite. So let's look at another few of those. So negative 7 plus 9 minus negative 4. Okay, so here, again, that's going to stay the same. Adding, we're not going to change the 9, but anytime we see the subtraction, we add the opposite. So those now become positives. So if I combine the first two, -7 and +9, adding those together, I get 2. And now I have +4, because those are now both positive, and I get a 6 again. Okay? And let's do one more of those. So -8, take away 11, take away -6. Here we have two subtractions to change. So this guy again stays the same. That's a negative sign. We're leaving him alone. But here's a subtraction. Add the opposite. And here another subtraction. Add the opposite. So -8 plus -11 together, those guys make -18, adding them up and keeping the sign. Plus, again, we don't have to write two pluses together if we're adding a positive. That's just going to be +6. -18 plus 6, different sign. Subtract, answer has a sign of the bigger number. So it's going to be negative, and 18 minus 6 is 12. Oops. So there are problems a lot like what you'll see on your assignment. Okay, and so what else you'll have to do is some mental math to solve some equations. And let me flip the page here and we'll look at a couple of those. Okay, so the directions will say something like solve using mental math. And eventually we'll learn some ways to solve these equations. Some of you might already know them, showing some steps, but here we're just going to look at it. And these might help to do with a number line, which again, I put a link on our last assignment for that. And if you need one, let me know. So here, if you think about this, what number take away 4 is 8? Well, it's got to be bigger than 8. And really what this is 8 plus 4, or 12. So you're just thinking about it. So what number, m, in this case m represents a number, take away 4 is 8. Well, 12 take away 4 is 8, so the answer is 12. Okay, and now here's another one. X minus -2 is 10. Okay, again, those two negative signs, the subtraction here and the negative sign, those might be tricky. So I'm going to change those to adding the opposite. Okay, remember this guy stays the same. The 10's over here by itself on that side of the equal sign. It doesn't change. So this now looks like this. Let me draw a little arrow. And this looks like x plus 2 is 10. Okay, if we think about that for a minute, what number do we have to add to get 10? Okay, well, 8 plus 2 is 10, so that means x is 8. Okay, so just think about it, and eventually we'll learn some other ways to solve that, and some of you might kind of see how that works here, because to solve this, we're subtracting 2 from both sides, and we'll learn more about that later. Okay, here's the last little bit, and here we're going to have some more letters, some more variables, and we're going to be evaluating. These are called expressions. So let me just write this out here real quick. So we're going to evaluate when k is -5, m is -3, and n is 10. Okay, those are the three letters we're going to use. So here's the first one, 3 minus n. Okay, so 3 minus n is the same thing as 3. Let's substitute for n. I'm going to put 10 in there. So 3 take away 10. And some of you, again, you may not need to change something like this using addition by the opposite, but I'm going to do it anyway. So this is going to become 3 plus -10. Okay, so again, adding the opposite. So 3 plus -10, we've got opposite signs, so we subtract and we keep the bigger number sign for our answer. So 10 is bigger, it's negative, so it's going to be -7. Okay, let's look at a few more of those. We got -6 plus k minus n. Okay, again, what we just do here is plug in or substitute what these letters are equal to. So -6 plus, I'm going to use parentheses here to separate the signs because k is -5, so it just looks nicer to have the parentheses there, I think, minus 10. Okay, I'm just going to work left to right here. I will also change this one to be adding the opposite now that I've substituted in. So a negative 6 and a negative 5, well together those make negative 11, and we've got plus the negative 10 here. I'll put parentheses around it just to separate it a little bit. And a negative 11 and a negative 10, signs are the same. Add them up, keep the sign. The answer is negative 21. Okay, a couple more here. We got m minus negative 2. Okay, so let me plug in for m. So that's negative 3 take away negative 2. And I'm going to do the adding the opposite again. So add the opposite. So this now becomes negative 3 plus positive 2. Well, that's just negative 1. You could have also added the opposite here at the beginning of the problem and you get the same thing. Okay, last but not least, we've got one with absolute value bars on it. So the absolute value of m minus k. So we're going to figure out what m minus k is, and then we'll take the absolute value of that and we'll be done. So let's substitute first. So here, keep the bars on it. So m is negative 3 minus, and I'm going to use parentheses because k is negative, negative 5. Close the parentheses and put my bar back on there. Okay, well let's do the adding the opposite. So plus plus, again the negative 3 stays just the way it is. So now we have the absolute value of negative 3 plus 5, which becomes the absolute value. Negative 3 plus 5 is 2, and the absolute value of 2 is just 2. And there's, oh, you can't see that, I'm sorry. And the absolute value of 2 is 2, so there's our answer. So I think this should be enough to get you through the assignment there for 1.3. And again, if you have any questions at all, please do not hesitate to send me a message on our Google Classroom. So thank you, and there you go.